Hey everyone, welcome back to Owen Likes Comics. Today I'm joined by a wonderful special guest. I'm joined by writer extraordinaire Scott Snyder. Scott, how are you doing?
I'm great, Owen. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry I'm a bit of a mess. I was like telling Owen before we came on that I usually do these from my office, but it's sort of like Arctic weather here in New York, and I've been too lazy to go out there and turn the heat on. I have like an office off the house in the woods, but it's like predominantly glass, so it takes a while to heat up. And so this is coming to you straight from my 13-year-old's room where you can see the bad news bears, and I don't have like a fake gold gamer chain and chair and all of that stuff, but and giant cutouts of Aaron Judge and so on. But
Not that this isn't
I'm
how
very
your
proud
office
that he does. Yes,
is so
although in my office
disgusting.
would probably be a lot cooler if it did. So
But yeah, so we're going to have a conversation about this little thing called Absolute DC. It's this very fascinating, brilliant initiative that you and the folks at DC launched late last year, and is really kind of coming into its own in 2025. And as part of the video that I've got coming out next week on kind of a guide to the Absolute Universe, thought we could have a little bit of a good conversation about where the ideas behind this imprint came from, the kind of ethos and the mission statement of the universe, and then specifically looking what you and Nick Dragosha and Frank Martin are doing on Absolute Batman, which is a brilliant series, which I am thoroughly enjoying. Though I'm a little sad that you didn't take my suggestion that I gave you at New York, that every issue Nick should draw Batman like an inch bigger, to the
well, he
point where
gets.
like by once we get into double digits, every page is a two-page spread.
I'll show you if you want. Like I mean, he gets the next issue. Four comes out, this week, and that's the amazing Gabriel Walta, and it's kind of us doing a like a Batman year one compressed into one issue. It tells the whole first year of our Batman's journey, how he gets bigger and more ambitious. And I really love the work that Gabriel and Frank did on it, and Nick kind of co-wrote it with me. So it really is like a thesis statement on our character. But then issue five, Nick comes back to finish this arc, do our big finale, the big knockdown, drag out fight between Bruce and the party animals. And I swear he looks bigger. Like he's even more intimidating, and he does all these things with his cape where he takes the hooks and throws them into people and they pierce them. And at one point he's fighting with this dude spiked on his back, and he's still fighting
I love
everybody.
all of this.
It was weird. It was like, going back to your question, I mean, it what happened was, and forgive me if I've said this to you before, like, because I know you and I have communicated, and I don't want to repeat myself to you, but for people listening who haven't heard it, like the way that all of it came about really was, when I finally left DC in 2020 after being there for about 10 years. I just needed a break. I needed to go do my own stuff. And I had so many ideas in my head that I was just dying to try. I wanted to be experimental. I wanted to surprise myself. I wanted to just do every kind of, creative swing that I had hoped to take. So everything from historical fiction like Barnstormers, the book I did with Tula LaFay, to prose stuff like Book of Evil with Jock. And it really was this kind of, I just like treehouse where I just needed to get away from a lot of the corporate pressure. And I loved DC, and I loved being there, and I loved death metal and the culmination of the stuff that we got to do. But it was a really rough time also at DC back then, when there was a lot of turnover internally. There was a lot of, you know, sort of reshaping of the company, people leaving, people, and so there was just a lot. It was very chaotic, and so it was hard to sort of hold the steering wheel on a plane like death metal. And so it was just kind of like me to just do my own thing. And then while I was away, I really got to enjoy superhero comics as an outsider. And one of the strange things was, you feel this real pride being part of that community, having been part of that community, and the sort of cultural conversation about superheroes at that time, and still now a little bit, but especially a couple of years ago, was just that the Marvel and DC universes seem to be over, or the biggest stories had been told, and now we're in this lull before it kind of launches again, the DC stuff with James Gunn and the Marvel stuff in whatever format. it takes. And it just felt like people were really down on superheroes, and that, it was over and done. And and looking around comics, it felt like so many of the best stories in a long time were being told at that moment, from Immortal Hulk, to Nightwing, to World's Finest, and on and on. And so it became this mission statement for me and Josh Williamson. We had been talking about it for a while. Like, you know what? We miss the days when DC and Marvel, but being a part of DC, when DC would take these big swings where we would do things like the New 52 or Rebirth, even the events, since even Metal and Death Metal still felt more compartmentalized. We didn't do line-wide initiatives the same way, where we were able to kind of announce what the company was about at this moment, and every book would be trying something, whether it was experimental, whether it was traditional, but everything at once, sort of making a statement. And those moments were so fun to be a part of, but they were also, a lot of the time, they were kind of reactive to the market. Again, I hope I'm not speaking like too sort of dryly about the business of comics, but the way that it worked a lot of the time was DC was reactive. It was kind of, well, you know what, we need to do something big and new, so let's do the New 52. Or that was great, but now we have to go back the other way, because it's almost, we need to go back traditional. And some of us there always felt like, why don't we do all these things at the same time? Like, why don't we try something more nuanced, where we do some really new, we do a universe where it's brand new books and brand new takes on the superheroes, all of them, like really modernized takes, like the New 52 is supposed to be. And then why don't we also do something that's more like Rebirth? It gives traditional fans that have been reading a long time the biggest, most epic stories they could ask for, and provide a jumping on point for everybody. So it became this like really, this really ambitious idea with me and Josh a few years ago. We were like, you know what? Let's just see if DC's up for it. Why not? Let's see if they'll do it if we get together and sort of pen something. And I remember meeting with Jim Lee, like at New York a few years ago, and telling him the idea, and he was like, you know what? Why not? Let's see if we can get it done. And then meeting again at San Diego that summer, and then New York again in the fall, and it got closer and closer, where we gave it more and more shape. And we talked about how it would take about a year to get everybody on board creatively, so that it would take about a year to let everybody decide what they wanted to do in the fall, and not make anyone feel rushed. And DC was just great about it. And then it became, okay, if I'm gonna do, Josh and I are gonna tell them, make the meta story together that drives it. It's sort of about the same thing we were saying. It's about Darkseid kind of feeling like he realizes that he's meant to be the one that ends all superheroes once and for all stories, and that time has passed. So he's sort of the troll, like out there in the critical world, saying superheroes are done. And the superheroes realize they have to embrace both sort of new and unknown things and traditional things to be able to fight him. So the story is largely about the same kind of ethos as the whole initiative. And then it became, all right, we'll do that, and then I'll manage the Absolute Universe a little bit more. I'll go out to people, make the pitch, and you work a little bit more on the main line, and we'll come together and do Summit. And so that's kind of how it came to be. And then for me, the ethos of the Absolute Universe was really simple. It was just bringing in creators, and that was one of the big things about the whole All-In initiative. It was trying to be really creator forward, allowing creators to take big swings, and saying, especially with the Absolute line, the only way to do it would be if creators came in with really strong ideas about how to take the hero and make them someone that was even more exciting to you, still true to core, but someone who was an underdog in this world, someone who didn't have some of the same advantages, and somebody who felt like they were anything vestigial about that character could be changed. There was nothing precious except the core values. And so that's really where it came from. Then I started going out to people, being like, Jason was the first one I went to, Jason Aaron, and I was asking him, I was saying, do you want to do Batman? Do you want to do Wonder Woman? Do you want to do Superman? Do you want to do whatever? And he really sort of focused in on Superman quickly, and it was amazing to see. He was like, I really want to do Superman, but I want him to be more of this folk hero and this and that. Please do it. And so he came on first, and then Kelly came on for Wonder Woman, and had this amazing pitch again about how what all changed about Wonder Woman is that instead of being raised on this perfect island, and being the secret hero of apart from history, the Amazons will be the secret heroes of history, people that have done things that are unappreciated, and Wonder Woman will be raised in hell. And I was just like, that's amazing, go for it. And then Batman was the last one. It was the last one out of the three. And I had promised DC that I would write a book, but I thought that I would write Dark Side, or I would, write. At one point I was pitching a Detective Chimp book, where it was like, I'll do a small book if you have three real tentpole series. So I was trying to just be a monkey wrench and be like, but as I know, because we were talking about it off air, and the pitch that I used to go to other creators to sort of get them excited about Absolute was a Batman pitch. It was the pitch that is Absolute Batman. It was a what if you, as an example, you could do Batman like this, if you took Batman and inverted the mythology, where he has no money and no resources, and he's outside the system and the chaos, and Joker and all the villains are part of the system, and they're rich. And Joker is the billionaire, and so on. And anyway, that was the pitch. And then eventually, of course, James Tynan, who's one of my best friends, was the one that called me when I was sort of desperately looking for people to do Absolute Batman, and he was like, I have somebody for you. And I was just like, well, who is it? You? Please tell me you're going to do it. And he was like, no, you. And I was like, what? I'm not going back to Batman. He knew, because I had been pitching the book nonstop. I mean, it really was like, every time I said you could do it like this, I was like, oh man, I wish I really do. I would like to do that one day. I wish I could do that. But and it's become I was terrified, though. I'll say that. And I know this is the longest answer in the history of the world, but I was terrified. I'm still terrified. But it really was like, if everybody's taking their biggest swing, then this genuinely was mine. Like, to just say, okay, well, if I can come on and do something that doesn't feel repetitive and feels inventive, then that would be my biggest contribution. So why not?
Yeah, it's so fascinating to hear your insight on both kind of the formation of the line as a whole, and then your own kind of personal journey to come to Batman. It's funny. So from my perspective, when it was announced that you were doing Absolute Batman, it seemed logical, but also a bit intriguing, where it's like, not to kind of blow smoke up your ass because I'm speaking to you, but you are probably my favorite Batman writer of the 21st century, which is high praise, because I am a bit of a Grant Morrison super fan, and they also wrote one of the top 10 best Batman runs of all time in that time period. A connoisseur's choice. I love that series so much, and yours as well. It was, that New 52 Batman run was a massive part of me not only getting back into reading comics after a kind of few years away, but also like starting to think about comics analytically and writing about them, and then that kind of segued into what I do now. So it's always a run I've had a lot of reverence for, and I've always enjoyed and appreciated your take on that character. But after doing 52 issues of that, the detective run that you did beforehand, then things like Last Night on Earth and All Star, and then obviously Batman's presence in all of the Metal series, I'd kind of felt like I'd experienced the widest scope of everything you had to say on that character. So when Absolute was announced, and obviously they showed Nick's kind of the cover of issue 1, it was like, oh, okay, Scott's found a new way into the character by kind of rebuilding the character from the ground up. Let's see where this goes. And then following the series over the first 4 issues has been, it's funny because we were talking about it off mic, that it's interesting to read it in conversation with your previous Batman works. And it is like, you can tell that this is someone that knows the character inside and out, that is, playing and pulling with the mythology and the history in such interesting ways. I'll tell you off mic later. There was a moment that happened in issue 3 that literally made me slam the comic onto the table and just be like, how do people think of this? This is so clever. It was for spoilers for anyone that hasn't read issue 3, it's the Arc M reveal.
Oh, thank you.
That was such a and it was like I didn't see it coming until the previous page, and I felt so silly for not getting it. And it was such a clever subversion of what that term means.
Thanks. Yeah, it's so weird, Owen. Like the series, it's at once like really scary to do, and at the same time, it feels kind of effortless. Like right now, I just finished issue 8, or issue 7 to 8. It's a 2-parter in between arcs, and I keep expecting this one, not to spoil too much, but it deals with Mr. Freeze, and it's just again, I'm like, oh, how am I gonna I did Mr. Freeze with Jock on All Star, and I did this and that, and then you get into it, and all of a sudden it's just that, like you said, it's so rebuilt from the ground up mythologically that everything feels different. So it was like it just almost just it just sort of flows out, where it's like, oh, I know how to do Mr. Freeze in this mythology, because he wouldn't be Victor in love with Nora, who's frozen. He'd be something different, because you just plug him into the basic foundational math of the mythos here, and it's Joker. Wait till you see Joker. I mean, that's the thing that I always love Joker, but this one is really different. Like this one he's more different than Bruce is from the traditional Batman.
I'm so intrigued to see kind of what this version of Joker is, because something I've always appreciated is that, like, you've used Joker quite a few times throughout your Batman run, but I never feel like you've written the same Joker twice.
Yeah, that's the whole idea with him for me. Is it's funny, sometimes like the really short things can be some of your favorites, and we did this. Jock and I did this very like 8-page story, so really brief, for the Joker anniversary issue, the 80th anniversary of the Joker, and it really is sort of my my thesis on the character, where it's a told from the point of view of a therapist who deals with Joker victims, and he doesn't understand why they all believe the Joker is something beyond human, that he isn't just sort of a man, and with bad skin and so on, and they all have these theories and so on, and he's just trying to debunk them. But the core idea is that the Joker is the Joker card, right? So the Joker card, a lot of the time, for people that don't play traditional card games, can usually takes on the value that you ascribe to it. It can be anything.
It can be anything.
So anything that you want, that you need to win the hand, you can make that card take on that value. And so for me, the Joker takes on the value that he thinks, in his way, Batman needs to win. And what he needs is his worst fear. He needs whatever it is that he needs that will challenge him to the greatest degree. And so he becomes that thing. And as a writing device, that's what he is. So in this world, Joker is nothing like anything Batman has faced, because Batman is like nothing.
Well, yeah.
Joker is faced. And where they're headed is so interesting to me. I don't want to spoil too much, because this doesn't happen until like issue 13 or 14, even beyond, really. But I want Joker to be the one that has these resources, and has the cave, and has the vehicles, and this. And he's not sitting there as a white, long-faced clown. He's very different than that in this. There's a whole, you'll start to learn more about him very soon. There's actually like the first big hint about him comes in issue 7, about his history. But
I really love how you kind of phrase that, and it's something that I've thought about as well. I remember I wrote a piece for a blog or an article years ago, and it was comparing the way you presented the Joker throughout the New 52 Batman run versus Morrison's depiction of Joker in their run. So going from like Batman R.I.P. and then into I can't remember the character's name, where he shows up in the Dick Batman run,
with the hat,
where he's pretending to be like the private detective.
Yeah, and the author.
Yes, and then going into Death in the Family, and then going into Endgame, how those two kind of of 4 or 5 different takes on the Joker all in conversation with each other. And something that I thought about then, and you kind of hinted at, is that idea of the Joker kind of manifests himself as a reaction to whatever Batman is. So, you know, obviously Batman in Death of the Family, the Joker, both in terms of his presentation and what he does, is very much a reaction to what Batman's going through. The same with Endgame, the same with, you know, what Grant did in R.I.P. and so on. And then, like you said, in this instance, this is an incredibly different Batman. This is a Batman that has very little in common with kind of Batman Prime. So it would make sense that the Joker, as a reaction to Batman, as kind of the opposite force, would also take on such an unrecognizable form.
Yeah. And I mean, like, not to give too much away, but I mean, Joker is he's much closer to traditional Bruce Wayne than this Bruce Wayne is. So he's almost like, when you first see him, you'll see, I mean, there's a secret to him, but he's handsome and he's wealthy, and he's very private. He's not like a big public figure, but he becomes more public later in the run. But he's terrifying when you see what he really is. But to me, his value system is the inverse of Bruce's. You know, if Bruce believes that one person can change everything, and he has to learn how. Part of if I had to say what I think the whole first year and a half is about, because we're doing these interstitial mini arcs, like 1 issue, 2 issues in between the arcs, and some of the arcs, like the second arc, will have 1 issue in the middle that will give the origin of the villain. I've been like not too secretive about wanting to bring Bane in and have somebody who's bigger than Bruce fighting Bruce, which would be fun. But so
sorry to interrupt. Then I was really hoping that Absolute Bane was going to be like a really tiny guy.
Well, he might be that and then grow.
Yeah,
but I don't want to give too much away. But when he's big, he's big. He's like formidable, and you know, I just want someone who Bruce walks out and sees and has to look up at.
A physical obstacle to him, which this Batman very rarely has.
Yeah, and then but there's a psychological challenge for him as well with him. But the first year and a half, I guess, would comprise like season 1 of the book, just because, if you think about those interstitial arcs plus the arcs being about 5 issues apiece, you're talking about probably about 18, 19, 20 issues to do sort of the 3 arcs that we had planned as our initial pitch. But we're not stopping there. I just mean to sort of cycle through up to the Joker and that stuff. So, but you'll see the first hint of sort of the Joker's background in 7. You'll get a big piece of it. We're going to do an Arkham issue about Arkham itself sometime in the probably late spring, early summer. You'll get something there, and then about him and his past, and then you'll get the real stuff and 13 plus. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, and you know, I want him to haunt the book I just want him to haunt the book. Like, I just watched Nosferatu, and Joker is not a vampire and is not supernatural, but the dread you feel in the beginning of that film of when Nosferatu is coming to town, and there's this feeling of like portent and you know, this ominous kind of shadow cast across the city. That's the way I want you as a reader to feel afraid of him, that he's not funny, and there's nothing playful about this one. There's something comically horrifying when you see his true face and all of this, but he is a real horror figure in this one. And he's also, again, he's the inverse of Bruce. And what I'd say, if Bruce's first year and a half, the first season of the book, is about Bruce realizing in a lot of ways that Batman, the only way, how would you in this world as one person affect change, you know, the way he wants to? You have to be a collective, you know what I mean? You have to be able to inspire people and then let them in. And you have to, you know, let the idea spread and be more than one person in that way. I'm not saying he's going to be 100 Batman, but That's the sort of the thesis of the year, is that the only way that Batman can really work in this context is for him to yeah, be communal,
Mhm.
and let people in to work with him. Whereas in the main universe, I kind of feel like the lesson of Batman is often there's only one person that can ever be Batman, and that's Bruce Wayne. You need all of these very rarefied aspects.
Yeah, and I
He
mean,
has
you
to be
you quite literally wrote a series in Super Heavy that's all about that idea.
yeah, exactly. And it's like someone who can only devote their life to it, who only has the resources for it, who's mythologically dedicated and is as a cipher in the way that they're the simplest tale, the simplest construction. Just tragedy hits, trauma hits, and you turn it into fuel, and you have nothing else but that for your whole life.
Yeah,
And but if you flip it and you say Batman in this universe, he's smart. He's very smart. You know, he still is but he can be anyone. Like Bruce Wayne is special. Don't get me wrong, because he's as determined, if not more determined, than Bruce in the main universe. But he also has a job, and he also has a mom, and he
yeah.
is almost everyone.
He doesn't have
And
the kind of advantages that even Bruce in the main continuity would have.
not at all. And he trains. People are like, "Oh, well, he has his mom, but that's nicer." Yes, but if you want to be Batman and you don't have the resources to train around the world, with the best of the best, and so you learn to fight with your friend Waylon Jones, who's a MMA guy, and you learn submission and you learn striking and you learn this, but you don't know 800 different kinds of
Mm.
martial arts. And so similarly, you are a great detective and you have a great mathematical mind, but you don't get to study with Henry Ducard. You know who does do those things? The Joker. Joker has studied with those people. He is much more deadly. He is much more trained. And so how do you as someone without those resources go up against that? You have a few things. Like, one is you be really fucking big, and you that's part of it, is like you're going to be like a brute force that's
Yeah,
just almost like unstoppable. That's why I wanted him to feel like a force of nature that's just like, he's not just big and violent for the sake of being big and violent. That's his tools. That's what, if I'm going to be so subtractive and take everything away from him as a reader. I mean, I thought a lot about this part of it, actually, where it was like, if you're going to take away his cars, I mean, he still has an awesome car, and he has another awesome car that you'll see later. It's like Nick designed it. He loves dune buggies, and it's like it would be cheap to make. It's a dune buggy with these wheels, and it can flip and keep going. Like, it's
that's
just like it's
awesome.
like a tumbler. It's really cool. But anyway, so he has some cool cars, but I just mean, you don't have planes and tech, and you don't
Yeah,
have the
this kind
big
of
back.
unlimited resources of gadgets and accessories.
No, you don't have the back computer. You don't have any of that stuff. You
Mhm.
don't have. Then, like, what am I going to give you, the reader, that's going to make this as fun as the
Yeah,
main?
it's like
So
if I was to describe this version of Batman, he's pretty much armed with just his two hands and the best of intentions.
yeah, but he's like a guerrilla fighter. That's
Yeah,
what he is. He's like a rebel in Gotham. And so that idea was, okay, I could see that. But then I thought about it and was like, the design in Zero Year speaks to that when he's working in the post-apocalyptic Gotham. So I don't really have a way of doing that again visually. So then I'm like, well, what can I give him that makes him fun? What makes him feel young and different? And I was like, well, my kids, like my 17-year-old, all his friends in here, they go to the gym all the time. It's like much more than when I was a kid. There's more of a
mm,
culture of, they're not big weightlifting kids, but they're more. So I was like, you know what? This Bruce would be big. He would be huge. He'd be giant. And I was like, that's kind of, I've never seen Dark Knight Returns Batman, but young.
that size is always something that Bruce evolves into. To see him kind of
Yeah.
start like this is such an interesting subversion.
Well, that was the additive thing. So that was it. It was like, okay, he's going to be so badass and big that will make up for not having
Yeah, because you think of like,
stars and that. Because
you
it's
know,
a power fantasy too, Batman. It's the fantasy of wanting to be able to go in there and break the rules and affect things that you care about, and to make the world better, but to do it with no restriction. And there's this magical wish fulfillment with super rich Bruce, because there's nowhere he can't go as both Bruce Wayne and as, but like, for example, like right now in the mini arc in between arcs, the 2 issue thing in between arc 1 and arc 2, Bruce doesn't have any way of getting into to figure out arc N, because while Bruce Wayne proper could just like be like, hi, I'm an investor and I'm gonna fly over here, and this Bruce doesn't have any way of getting on the work crew. And so he goes to Matches Malone, his friend, to get work papers, because Matches is this like super con artist, to try and get on the construction crew and see what's happening there. And that's part of the story. And so he's denied access to all these things, which is really fun when you start writing them. But it also requires, that's why it's like, what am I going to give him that's going to make him feel like you still have wish fulfillment?
Yeah.
When he walks into a room and he's just like so big that you're kind of like, you know what, I'd like to be that Batman too, just be like, you know. So
and
that
it is like such an interesting subversion, like we said, because I'm just thinking about, because you mentioned Dark Knight Returns, like Miller draws Batman at the end of his career as this like unstoppable tank, but like when Mazzucchelli does Year One, the Batsuit, it doesn't even have muscles imprinted on it. He's just a normal guy. And the same, like when you and Greg did Zero Year, it's like the leanest Batman that Greg drew in that run, aside from like Jim Gordon in his skin tight black swimsuit. So, and like you said, if you're taking all of this stuff away from Bruce, you need to give him something. And so kind of alongside his heart and his will and kind of his smarts, just give him this size. And he's just kind of like, he's like the wrecking ball from Raiders of the Lost Ark, just rampaging through Gotham. But in a tactical and purposeful way. It's not like the Hulk. Everything is done with precision, with purpose.
Yeah, and these last 2 issues of the arc, I mean, again, for people watching, I mean, 4 is out now, but 5 and 6 are two of my favorite issues I've ever been a part of, where you'll see, I don't want to give too much away, but you'll really get a sense of him in a way where he, because, you know, issue 3 ends with him sort of saying, I need the money, I need to take this deal from Black Mask and have all the things that the main universe Batman has. And then you sort of see where that goes in 5 and 6. And I just love it, where he really is almost more Joker in some ways than Batman, without being, you know, he's not an anarchist, he's not chaos, you know, embodied, but he is ready to break things to rebuild them. He's a builder, you know. And that idea of being able to write him from that perspective, especially at a moment like now, and because that's really the thing, Owen, is like where it came from. Like the idea wasn't just like what hasn't been done on Batman, or what haven't I seen. It really came from this concept of, okay, well, if we're going to do an absolute universe, then the characters need to be modern and resonant. And I kept being like, well, when I wrote Batman before, I wrote him as me, sort of going up against the things I was most afraid of. Not that I have anything in common with Batman, but Batman, meaning he was an extension of the way in which I wish I was brave, facing the things I'm afraid of, whether that was fatherhood and like death of the family, and deeply coded, so you don't necessarily see it that way. But for me, that's what that story is, or the history and legacy of the book itself and Court of Owls. Like, but with now, it's hard for me to inhabit that, not because I'm over Batman, but because I really did do that a lot. And there are things that I'm afraid of now. But as a father, and as a father with kids now that are, when I started Batman, my son was 2, and now my son is, you know, he's 17, about to start college. And I have 2 other sons, one of whom is 13, and then one is 5. So for me, I'm much more afraid of the world for them than I am for myself. And that is a very different construction. And so Batman isn't, you either write Batman as a father, where he's protecting the Bat family in some way, or you don't be Batman. And so for me, that's what this series is. I'm Alfred. I'm the one watching through Alfred's eyes, and seeing Batman as my kids, and they don't think billionaires are cool. They don't like billionaires. They don't want to be part of the system. They have things they're passionate about, and they feel very much like they're not going to accept the world handed to them the way it is. They believe in change, and that's inspiring to someone who feels guilty and complicit in the world they were handed. And that's Alfred, so that's the series to me, is Bruce being not just this kind of big hulking thing, but this sort of physical manifestation of that indomitable will that young people have to be like, I refuse to accept that this is what this is. I believe we can change things, or I can change things. And I am willing to break it if it needs to be broken to be
Yeah.
fixed.
No, definitely. And I'm glad that that's something that I picked up through my reading of the series, where it is like, and it was something I was thinking about when prepping this interview, that you're coming back to Batman like 10 years after you did your last kind of big run on the character. Obviously, you're 10 years older, a lot's changed in your life. You're a different person who you were. So your perspective on the character is going to shift. And as well, like, this is a Batman who is what, early 20s?
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
kind of closer in age to your kids than he is to you. And this is a
Much.
Gen Z Batman. And without kind of trying to turn it cringy or anything, it is a version of the character that speaks to that generation of people that are just now coming into adulthood in a world that, for lack of a better term, is just on fire.
Oh yeah. And to see that's the other thing with the series, not to like sound crass about it or anything, but I never expected it to take off the way it's taken off. I mean, I was really and internally, like, just to be completely transparent, the hope was, that it would sell over 100,000 the first issue, maybe 120. And if we could manage that, that would be a big hit for us as an alternative Batman. And so I was just worried, can I hit those numbers? Nick was also, I really wanted it for Nick because Nick is amazing and I love him, but he's also not traditional in terms of a DC style. And I just thought he was perfect he's the only person I asked to do it with me. And that whole, I pushed really hard, promoting it and all of this, not because I wanted it to sell gangbusters, because I really didn't I didn't know if it would sell at all. I was worried it would sell half what they wanted, because I didn't know if anyone would respond to me coming back to Batman. I didn't know if they would respond to something so different that looks so different. And then to see the response be what it is, and to have it, hit 450,000, and then not really, it declines from that, but it's still well over 100,000 at 4 and 5.
Yeah.
And that to me is just, it's selling better than the original Batman did at this point. And that, is just, it's mind blowing. And even more exciting is to see two things. Like, one, like you said, TikTok and all the young people really liking the book. And I stay off because I don't want to be I don't want to be like the old guy on TikTok. As much as I set up an account a couple of years ago, being like, I should try this, and then I was like, I can't do this. But they, seeing people do things about Absolute Batman makes my day. And then thirdly, to see the way that people didn't just come in for Absolute Batman, but came in for Absolute Wonder Woman, Absolute Superman. They sold those books over 200 plus thousand, and are keeping them at the top of the charts. It just speaks to the belief that we had in the whole line, which was when we first started that. Going back to your first question, like when Josh and I were talking about the size and scope of the All In Initiative, we didn't know if we should do 3 books in the Absolute Universe or less, maybe start with just one, the main line. Maybe we do a few things called All In. But every retailer we talked to, because the common wisdom was that the market was down. The market was down. The market has been down the last year. It's a tough market. And it is a tough market. But it has also been like an inflated market in a lot of ways for the last like 15 years, where there have been a lot of things propping up superhero comics and indie comics at different times in ways that have been really great and like beneficial to creators, beneficial to retailers, beneficial to, for example, like, speculator boom coming in, where it has a lot of downside, but there's a period when streaming was going way up and everything was getting optioned for TV right and left. And me and my friends, like, it's always wonderful if that happens, but you're always focused on making it the best comic you can. But what you start to notice is that all of a sudden the first issues are selling gangbusters because speculators want to get the first issue of something that might be a TV series. And so you can make a living off of it suddenly, and then you can use that money to finance something else. And so I'm not knocking all of these peaks, but things like that, things like the movies, things like um, the influx of new comic companies that had deals with different TV and streaming companies. All this stuff has made comics almost like, you know, bigger and sell more, and all of like brought the floor up beneath comics a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. The superhero movies, the merch, all of it. And right now we're in a period of contraction where it's sort of like, you know, the real market. And what we were afraid of was, yeah, how big do we go? We don't want to do anything that's going to hurt retailers. And when we spoke to retailers, we spoke to Steve at Third Eye and Gall at Midtown and Golden Apple, and we spoke a lot of different retailers, DCBS and Lunar and all distributors and Program Planet, and we're like, what do you think we should do? How big? And they were like, as big as you can go. Do all of it. Do everything, because if you do it, the readership will show up because they want to be excited right now. They're tired of being told that superheroes are over. They're tired of being told comics are second fiddle to other things. Do comics as comics. Like, do it as this medium doesn't need any of that stuff. Show why it's, and so to see the response overall was not just an affirmation of like our hopes for the initiative, but it was an affirmation of the retailer's wisdom, honestly, and the way in which they know their audience. And it was exciting to see that market will show up if you take a swing and do something that some people would be like, they're never going to show up for this, you know? So it's been great in that regard. But that's kind of, with Absolute Batman, it's that compass of really being like, okay, don't be afraid of doing the things that traditionally might shake them off, because if you do make Joker this thing you want to make him, there's definitely not been a Joker like that. So it's a little bit like, but then I'm like, no, it's perfect for it for me. I love it. So I'm going to go for it and do it. And this series, it's just this relationship suddenly with readers where it feels like they want you to go further and want you to push. So
Yeah,
really
I think that kind of, as someone that kind of is in the periphery of this industry and is kind of a pundit of it, you get a good sense of kind of fan sentiment, both of kind of casual fans and kind of diehard comic readers. And it does feel like for a little while people crave great stories, and people crave stories written by people who have things to say. And I think that this is something that in the last 12 months, I think both Marvel and DC have done very well with the Absolute books, with the All In books, with what Marvel have been doing on Ultimates as well.
Yeah.
The reason why something like what Hickman's doing on Ultimate Spider-Man, like that first issue, you know, the montage at the end where he's getting the narration where it's like, they stole your dreams, they stole your future, do you want to take it back? That's something that could have been in your series as well, not only kind of something that speaks to a generation of people coming into adulthood, but also like look what Dennis Camp is doing in Ultimates. Like every issue has such a clear through line of something to say, and it's so powerful, and it's something that only he could be writing. And that book's
literally we're texting right before I got on with you.
Dennis is wonderful.
He's become one of my like very close friends in the last year and a half in comics. And not to take a detour for a moment, but just
absolutely. I'm all down for some Dennis Camp praise, because
let me sing his praises for a minute on this, because first of all, like, let me also sing John's praises, like John Hickman on Ultimate Universe, because I think John is a touchstone of all comics, but his ability, like unsurpassed ability to kind of reinvent not just, you know, characters, but in entire neighborhoods of the Marvel universe, entire sort of paradigms of that universe is just really awe-inspiring. And I mean, we're friends, like we're friends. We've hung out. I don't know him as well as I know other people in comics, but I have tremendous admiration for what he and Marvel have been doing with the Ultimate Universe, and him as a writer. I mean, I'm super inspired by a lot of what he's been able to do, and a lot of the books happening over there right now. But Dennis in particular, I reached out to him when I read 20th Century Men a year ago or so, and just wrote him. It was like, I really love this book, and he wrote right back, and we wound up having stuff in common because he's in New York and I grew up in New York and in the city. I mean, and we had a lot of the same. Turns out, like some of the same literary influences and things, and I've been watching what he was doing on Ultimates, and then he pitched a Martian Manhunter, which was one of the best pitches I've read in years. And then the book itself is just staggeringly good. Him and Javi are doing something that I think people are going to read. I think it's going to be like the sleeper hit of the year, where like the way Vision was for Marvel, but I think it's going to hit. I mean, I actually think it's going to hit pretty high in numbers, and then like just I think he'll win everything with it, him and Javi this year.
I hope so.
Again,
Everything
so,
I've seen and heard for that book just looks on another level.
It is. It really is. And like Ultimates, I adore. But I've turned out, and now I talk to Dennis like every day now, where he, I he's so uncompromising when it comes to what he thinks. What he thinks he should be doing in comics, the way that comics can be made. And I'm learning from him. It's really fascinating. Like, this is what keeps me young as a writer, is coming in and have very strong ideas about what this Batman series should be, and that, but also like having young people, new people to talk to and be like, listen, I just wrote this, Mr. Freeze, what do you think? Like, I'd love your idea. And then he gave me this idea for actually a structure in the Mr. Freeze issue, because it felt a little like I was cramming things in. And he's like, what if you just do this conversation between Bruce and his friends as a backbone that you're cutting to throughout both issues? And I was like, I could totally do that. And the issue is about ice and time, how ice contains all time, and it's the memory of the earth, and it's breaking down. So if that's the case, then time in the issue can break down and all of that, make it. And that gets me excited because I haven't told a story in that format before. But it also is scary because I'm like, oh God, like I was telling him, I'm like, because I was like, the book is selling at a thing that makes me also hesitant to rock the boat. But he's always like, that's how you got the sales.
But also, like you said, that's what the book is. That's what this Batman is.
I know, but it's like,
and
it's so scary.
And it's what the universe is like. I bumped into Dennis briefly. I saw him in New York before they like formally unveiled Manhunter, but I briefly chatted to him afterwards, and it was like, this is not a book that would be made unless you had the most headstrong pitch on what you want this character in the series to be. And you can tell that just hearing him talk about it at the DC panel on the Friday, and seeing the art that Javier's done. It's, out of all of the Absolute books, this is the one where for me it was like, no, there is a vision here.
Oh yeah, well, there's vision. I can promise you, like, there's a vision for, we're going to be announcing 2 more as well, like by Che Grayson and Pornsack also, which I'm really excited about. One of them is within Gotham, and one of them is really different. And but every one of those, like, so part of my job was to just go around, and there wasn't anyone that I went to that really pitched and was just like, it didn't work. It was more like this kind of casual. I saw Al 2 New Yorks ago, and I was talking about how much I loved. We were on a patio outside of the distillery launch, and I was like, I'd met him, but I was just telling him how much I loved Immortal Hulk, and I was saying we're doing this line, and I'd love for you to pitch anything you want. And he was like, I might have an idea for Green Lantern, and I was like, well, okay, do you know what it is? And he was like, I do. And we talked for like an hour. He just went into it.
This is so fascinating because this is so fascinating because you won't have seen this yet. But when I spoke with Al, he gave me the other half of this exact conversation.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, and it was just like, I was like, we have to do this book, and it's a full reimagining of the mythology of Green Lantern, where it really is like, it is exactly true to core, where it's about light being will, and being will, but being the will, a different sort of will, and darkness chasing it, and the reinterpretation of that, and faith and hope and all of these was so grand and beautiful. And the way that the light is prismatic rather than separate, it's the way we perceive the light is in each species perceives it
Definitely.
differently.
Yeah, I remember like when I was chatting to him recently and he kind of explained the full scope of the pitch and what his kind of mission statement for it was. It was so clever and it made so much sense. And yeah, Al's one of the smartest people I think I've ever met, and his
Oh yeah,
ability of like world building and handling complex mythos, like what he did with the Hulk mythos, what he's been doing with the Thor mythos recently, like when it was announced that he was doing Absolute Lantern, it was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. The Green Lantern core is something that Al can sink his teeth into in such an interesting way, and then to kind of see this idea of what his pitch is and what his take of these characters unravel. But you could say the same for every book. Like talking to
but
Jeff
that's
about what Absolute Flash is sounds terrific.
absolutely.
Seeing what Kelly and Hayden are doing with Wonder Woman has been incredible. Like
They're so
Jason,
good.
what Jason and Rafa are doing on Superman, I love that series so much.
Wait till you get to issue 4 and 5 of that series too. Like, it's exciting to be a part of. You know, I'm not like the one that, it's not like I'm the architect of it in any way anymore. I mean, I just went to the people and brought them in or asked them, do you want to pitch? And listen, you know, I had some say in, you know, I would have had say in being like, let's not do that or let's this, but we lucked out. Like, people came in really passionate and the books are really varied. So Flash, you know, the way you modernize that with Beth according is to strip it down, like entirely strip it down. So it's really Wally focused, really one character being the first one to get these powers, no legacy, no. And it's a brilliant way of doing it because it just makes it so accessible and
And then
so.
also like with what Jeff's doing, like tonally as well, like it evokes this kind of like almost like invincible ultimate Spider-Man kind of
Yeah,
quality.
it's
This kind of
young, man.
coming of age tale, which is so he's just from what we've seen and what Jeff said publicly, like the optimism and the youthful exuberance that this Wally brings is so interesting in balance to the rest of these characters who are all in
Yeah.
these much darker places.
Well, and like it comes out a week before Martian Manhunter, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum in the
Yeah.
way that it's very much, it's about an adult. Like, John has a son who is autistic in it. John is like very much like an adult, like he is, you know, and it is a very adult, it's an adult book. It opens with a violent scene that you're like, and so, and the art itself, like that's what I love about this line is that, and it's what I love about what so DC, I'm talking to them right now, but there's no like, they asked me and I asked that, like, I'm excited to sort of be a part of not just Absolute Batman, but to consult with them for another year plus and sort of make sure that the meta story that we started with Darkseid has places to go and to manage, you know, whatever we're doing in the fall event wise and that stuff, and just to be a part of it. I mean, I love being there right now. It's such a nice moment. And it feels like, you know, for me, the goal, like the real goal would be we did a good job with All In. I mean, I'm really proud of the work that everybody did in the way that the line feels more exciting to me. It feels more cohesive because it's more diverse in terms of the pitches, in terms of the different takes on the books. It feels, and above all, it feels more to me creator forward overall. That it feels less editorially driven and more like, when you look at it, these are books, for better or worse, that are created by the creators along with their editors, and that it's not sort of pitches handed down or any of that. Not that DC was doing a lot of that before, but you want them, you know,
It goes back to what we were
there
saying
is some
earlier
of,
that
yeah,
that people want stories that are written by people with something to say, and
yes,
the beauty of it's why people have responded so well to Absolute Batman is you clearly have something to say, not only about Batman, but about the world and about comics. It's like we were talking about with Denny's, like with Ultimates. And what you're saying about kind of creative freedoms, and that ties really nicely to something that I wanted to mention, which is that when I spoke to Jeff about Flash, obviously we were also talking about Minor Arcana, his new creator-owned book.
yeah,
And he was saying
great
that
book.
it's incredible. I am in awe of that man's brain. But something that he mentioned when we were talking about Flash in relation to also writing this creator-owned series is he said that Flash feels like a creator-owned book. The way in which he's allowed to kind of write it and play with the mythos and build this corner of the universe up he said that it feels the same way it feels to do something like Sweet Tooth or Phantom Road or any of the other great creator-owned books he's doing. And when I spoke to Al, he spoke similar, that like he feels like this is part of a singular vision and that there is a cohesive plan for what this universe is and what it means, but also like it's so hands-off and it's so creator friendly. And I think that, you know, that also speaks to why people are enjoying it so much. People, like we keep saying, people want stories that aren't just kind of generic superhero stories. People want things that are saying something interesting, either whether that's about the character and about the world. And I think that the biggest testament of why all these books are doing so well is because they are speaking to people.
I agree. And I'd say the same thing about Marvel and the same thing about creator owned right now, where, and that was my hope. And I'm very excited that DC, I mean, I give all credit again to like DC for being so responsive to what Josh and I pitched about, listen, like letting things live or die on the merit of the passion of the creators, as opposed to playing it safe and doing things that have proven to work before. Because there is some of that. There is the thing that people have to see too is like when you think of DC, you know, you think of it as this company, but it's made up of like, you know, a handful, like a flora of editors who are a lot of whom are very young and passionate about comics, and they don't make a lot of money. Like they're here because they love this medium. And at the same time, they're run by, they have, you know, other companies now, which they didn't when I started, but they have all kinds of companies that own them. And there's a lot of fear in an economy like this about, what if we do take a swing and it doesn't work? What if we lose money this quarter in some huge way? Am I going to get fired? Like, and the fact that they all were like, fuck it, like, let's try something big and have fun when it's risky. I mean, from Anne and Jim at the top, all the way to, and Marie, all the way to, you know, not that there's like a low point, but I mean, all the way through the entire ecosystem to the assistant editors and interns, that everyone was like, let's do this together. You know, it's so invigorating, because I've been at DC and at companies when they've been, you know, when the culture has been difficult, you know, because people are, there's power at DC. I'll give you an example. It's like when they first moved to LA, there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of like, are we going to be part of the movies? Can we be part of the movies or the video? And you know, different personalities and different people pull things in different directions, and it's hard. And again, not throwing shade at any person. It's just that environment isn't coherent. There isn't like a, hey, this is about comics and this is about us doing something, and who are we and how do we get everybody in a room to believe in who we are right now? And what does that mean? Like, what do you want to present to people? And right now the idea was, let's present everything. Let's show them we can do brand new takes and do epic stuff and the goal is, if I said, like, if I stay at DC and consult, like my goal would be really simple. It's not only to keep it going through 25, but to build on it so that a year from now, again, in the beginning of 26, end of 25, we can do something that ups the ante for us as a company. It doesn't necessarily mean expanding absolute. It doesn't mean calling it all in again. It just means, when my goal is, when we get to 26, and again, it's all credit to editors and to Marie and them, but to just be a cheerleader for this and help in small ways that I can, have the line be something that you guys look at as readers and I look at and other creators look at and be like, that's where I want to be, because it feels like every book is organic to this team and is special and is passionate and is, it feels like they have something, like you said, that they're saying about the world or saying about, you know, this moment and all of that. And if that's, it doesn't have to be, it can be hyper political. Some of the books are, they can be hyper personal, which some of the books are. They can feel like they're giant space operas, but all of the books in some ways are, they're all personal. Like they all have to be a pitch where you have to defend it. Like what I'd say, if you have any interest ever in the future, if you're out there and you ever get to pitch for Marvel and DC, the thing that I always believed, like, and that I always put in my pitches at the end, is a personal statement about why this story matters. Why do you think, what does this mean to you? And again, sometimes they can be really, really intimate. It can be something that's like, look, this is about my father, about this, you know, and this is why this matters to me. Other times it can be something really outward looking. This is about this, you know, this political moment, this whatever. But it has to mean something to you. Otherwise, like, it can't just be like, this is cool or this is why.
Yeah.
Because that stuff always just, you know, it just kind of fails because it, you can feel it as a reader. I think, you know, you sense it.
Yeah,
Comic book market.
sincerity goes a long way in every facet of this business and this industry and this medium, both in terms of the writing, the publishing, the relationship with fans. People want to feel a connection. They want to feel that this is something with passion and with honesty and with sincerity. And I think that that's clearly something that's very important to you. It's very important and a big part of the Absolute line. I think it's a big reason why it's been so successful.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, we've tried really hard with it. You know, I mean, look, there've been, again, like, there've been a lot of chaotic years and stuff with the DC and comics in general that have been a part of, but I think part of the mission of this one with All In and Absolute, again, was to be creator forward, and I'll obviously be that, like, have that be the driving force, but it's also the environment, you know, at DC, to help foster, to the credit again of editorial, of everybody there, a really positive communal feel to DC, where we're supporting each other, and there is a sense of, like you were saying, like a relationship with fans and with retailers that's fun and sincere and not obscure, and is very much like, this is what we're going for, this is who we are, that. And, you know, I hope to sort of,
Yeah,
I don't know, expand on that in 25 a bit.
definitely. So the last thing I wanted to ask you before we wrap up, because I know that we've kind of ran a little bit long,
Oh, it's
is
okay.
that,
Yeah.
and this might end up in the video, so no pressure to give a really succinct and
Yeah.
good answer. So we've talked a lot about kind of the relationship with fans and the connection between fans and writers and characters and all of that. So if you were to speak to a group of fans, if I was to assemble a group of comic fans in the room right now, that's a mix of kind of long-time diehard comic book readers, lapsed fans that haven't maybe checked out a DC book in a while, or someone that's brand new to comics that just is a fan of movies, or is a fan of, you know, to play Marvel Rivals and wants to get into superheroes, or is just, you just wandered in here somehow. What would you say to them in regards to Absolute Batman, to the Absolute Universe, and to comics in general right now?
I mean, I would just say, in all honesty, it sounds like I'm blowing smoke, but I really feel like it's one of the best times to get into comics that you could possibly choose, because, like we said before, it's a moment when everyone seems to be taking their biggest swing. And that goes for licensed stuff. So, like, Transformers and G.I. Joe over at Image and Skybound. It goes for Marvel, where you have incredible things happening in the Ultimate Universe, and Fantastic Four. And then with Ryan is doing an amazing job. And at DC, we're trying to give you jumping on points all across the line. So basically, every book is user friendly. Every book is somebody taking their biggest swing on the character. And there's something for everybody. I mean, that was the goal with All In. And that's the way I feel comics in general is sort of proceeding right now, where we have, if what you want is like a really different take on the characters that feels like something you've never seen, but is responding to this moment, you have the Absolute line. And on the other hand, if what you want is to dive back into a book that, you know, character you've always loved, Green Lantern or Flash, or those stories are not only happening and epic right now, but they're deliberately trying to make themselves really accessible to new readers and readers that might have lapsed in comics. So I don't know. I have a lot of faith in this moment as a really great entry point for people that haven't been reading consistently over the years or are brand new to it. So I'm excited, you know, I really am. Like, I was worried coming in and doing All In and Absolute. I was worried people wouldn't show up. I was worried I'd be responsible for like a total crash. And I mean, I was really scared. Like, I had a lot of anxiety and panics about it, where I was like, what if I'm just completely fucking wrong about this whole thing? And we do all of this stuff and all my friends get fired that work at DC. What if I'm responsible for like the Titanic of DC? And to see the opposite happen is just, I'm just never stop being grateful to the retailers and fans out there, because it really makes me like, not choked up emotional, but emotional to look around and be like, I get to be part of this moment that says comics are fucking awesome, and people want them to be risk taking and daring and bold and passionate. And that's the proof of, like, that is the thesis of, that's the translation of these sales. There's not a lot of like hidden gimmicks. We didn't do thousands of variant covers and that stuff, and we didn't expect the sales to be what they are. So to see that as the evidence that people genuinely out there want you to take risks, it's one of the best moments in my career, just to feel a part of that, and to go to a convention and see that excitement, not just because it's my book or Absolute Batman is our book, but to see it for all comics, to go there and see them line up for us, but then line up for Dan Johnson on Transformers, or Josh, or it's just exciting. And there's so much great stuff. I'd be remiss if it wasn't like, there's so many great books out there. Like, if you're somebody that wants to try comics but doesn't want to read superheroes, like, there's a million things out there for you. There are all kinds of genres. I mean, there's stuff like, incredible indie books like EP Poo Poo and Ducks, and like just a million books that are autobiographical or memoir or this or that. And then there's books that are, like Something is Killing the Children, which are like your next favorite, immersive horror series, like and so it's just, there is really like a comic for every human being on the planet in some way. So again, I feel like it's what I've always wanted to do, and I get to wake up and do it every day. And I know I sound like corny a lot of the time, or hokey, but I don't really care. I mean, I'll happy to be like a juggling bear, a stupid sort of, whatever on my unicycle for comics, because I just feel really, like, honestly, just feel really grateful to get to be a part of it. So
Yeah. No, that you couldn't have said it any better if you tried. I that resonates with me and the work I try and do. They said sincerity goes a long way, and wearing your heart on your sleeve and taking risks and being passionate about this thing that we all love goes a long way. And I think it's really showing.
thanks,
And
man.
that's a perfect place, I think, to wrap up this conversation. Scott, thank you so much for joining me. If you'd like to plug and promote some things you're working on and where people can find you, the floor
Yeah,
is yours.
sure. Yeah, I'm doing a series called White Boat, also at with the amazing Francesco Francavilla at Distillery, and I'm doing another book that's about to come out right now called You Won't Feel a Thing. It's a horror book. They're both horror books, but this one is more of a realistic serial killer thriller with Jock, who's a longtime partner and equal, best friend, and I'm doing Absolute Batman over at DC. So it's only just started, so I hope you guys will check it out. But again, like, even more than my stuff, please go check out comics. Like, go check out the other Absolute books, go check out the Ultimate Universe, go check out Turtles and Transformers, and anything you've ever wanted to read in comics is happening in a good way right now.
Yes. And I'll leave links to all of your socials and everything you're working on in the description. If you're already not following Scott and you're not already keeping up with all of his amazing comics, I mean, you've made it an hour plus into this interview, so I'm sure that you have some interest in Scott Snyder and his work. But if not, head into the description, buy all of his awesome comics, follow him, send him love. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.